The sun hung low over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the endless fields of withering crops. Jacob, a middle-aged farmer with lines of exhaustion etched deep into his face, leaned against his worn shovel, staring at the land that once provided for him. The soil was cracked, the plants frail, and the weight of another failed season pressed heavily on his heart. Every step he took seemed burdened with worry, about the overdue bills piling on his kitchen table, the creditors calling with threats, and the gnawing thought that maybe his lifelong dream of keeping the family farm alive was slipping through his fingers. His old truck, parked crookedly by the barn, coughed and sputtered with every attempt to start, a reflection of his own tired spirit. Yet, for all his struggles, Jacob carried a quiet dignity, the kind that refused to give up even when life offered no promises. He still woke before dawn, still worked until the stars returned, and still whispered silent prayers that tomorrow might bring a change. What set him apart wasn't wealth or luck, but a heart that held on to kindness no matter how empty his pockets were. Though the farm seemed to be failing him, Jacob never let despair harden him. He believed in doing what was right, even when life didn't return the favor. And on this day, with dust clinging to his boots and hope wearing thin, fate was already preparing to test that belief in a way he could never imagine. Jacob walked the long stretch of road that connected the town's market to his farmhouse, carrying a small sack of vegetables he had managed to sell that day. The coins in his pocket clinked faintly, a reminder of how little they could cover against his endless debts. He adjusted his hat, shielding his eyes from the afternoon sun, when suddenly, he noticed a sleek car pulled off to the side of the dusty road. Its hood was open, and a young woman stood beside it, frustration written all over her face. Her polished appearance, clean shoes, pressed clothes, and a phone gripped tightly in her hand, made it clear she didn't belong here. She tried the ignition again, the engine giving nothing but a weak sputter before dying. Jacob slowed his steps, observing her quietly for a moment. He knew that most people from the city often looked down on men like him, but he also knew what it felt like to be stranded with no one to help. Despite his own burdens, he approached with a gentle smile. "Looks like you're having some trouble, miss," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. Startled, she glanced up, unsure whether to trust the rugged stranger standing before her. His clothes were worn, his hands calloused, but his eyes carried an honesty that eased her hesitation. With a small nod, she admitted, "It won't start." Jacob placed his sack down carefully, rolled up his sleeves, and said, "Well, let's see if we can't get you back on the road." Jacob leaned over the car's open hood, his rough, calloused hands moving with surprising care. Years of fixing broken tractors and patching up worn-out farm tools had given him an instinct for machines, even if they weren't his own. The young woman stood nearby, watching nervously as he checked the battery connections and adjusted a few loose wires. Sweat trickled down his brow, but he remained focused, determined to help a stranger who had no reason to expect kindness from him. After a few quiet moments of tinkering, Jacob gestured for her to try the ignition. She slid into the driver's seat, turned the key, and to her amazement, the engine coughed, then roared to life. Relief washed over her face as she looked at him through the windshield. Jacob simply wiped his hands on a rag he kept in his back pocket, offering her a modest smile, as if what he had done was nothing extraordinary. She stepped out, gratitude shining in her eyes. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly. Jacob shook his head. "We all need a little help sometimes," he replied, his tone humble and sincere. He made no move to ask for money, no hint of expecting anything in return. To him, it was simply the right thing to do. In that moment, the girl felt something shift inside her. She had grown up in a world where favors often came with strings attached, but here stood a man who gave freely, despite having so little himself. As the engine hummed steadily, the young woman lingered, reluctant to just drive away. There was something about Jacob, the quiet strength in his voice, the gentleness in his worn features, that made her want to know more. She asked about his farm, and though he rarely shared his troubles with strangers, he found himself speaking honestly. He told her about the long droughts that ruined his crops, the debts that piled higher each season, and the painful thought of possibly losing land that had been in his family for generations. Yet he spoke without bitterness, as if hope still clung to him despite everything. The girl listened closely, her expression softening with each word. For the first time in a while, she wasn't the polished city daughter of wealth, she was simply a human being moved by another's struggle. After a pause, she said quietly, "You've done so much for me, and you don't even know who I am." Jacob smiled faintly. "Doesn't matter who you are. Kindness isn't about names." Her throat tightened as she finally revealed the truth. She was the daughter of a prominent businessman, one who owned a chain of successful food companies. A man who, ironically, always spoke of needing reliable farmers to supply his businesses. She studied Jacob's tired eyes, realizing how life had crossed their paths for a reason. Pulling out her phone, she asked for his number, promising she might be able to help. Jacob only chuckled softly, waving it off as politeness, never imagining she truly meant it. Weeks passed, and Jacob continued his routine, rising before dawn and working until the stars filled the night sky. Though he tried not to dwell on that brief roadside encounter, her words lingered in his mind like a distant echo of hope he dared not believe. Then, one morning, his old phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Hesitant, he answered, only to hear the girl's voice, warm, excited, and full of purpose. She explained how she had told her father everything, the breakdown, Jacob's selfless help, and the honesty in his story. Moved by her account, her father wanted to meet him. At first, Jacob thought it was a cruel joke, but within days, the businessman himself arrived at the farm. Standing in Jacob's dusty fields, he offered what the farmer had nearly given up praying for, a partnership. He would buy Jacob's produce directly for his food companies, guaranteeing steady income and fair prices. The weight Jacob had carried for years seemed to lift in that instant. His farm could breathe again. His family's legacy would live on. As the businessmen drove away, Jacob stood in the field, the sun dipping low behind him, casting the land in golden light. For the first time in years, he smiled without forcing it. Looking over the soil he had nearly abandoned, Jacob whispered, "Sometimes the seeds we plant aren't in the ground at all. They're in the hearts we touch." And in that moment, he realized his kindness had come back to him 100-fold.